What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 195 of the Stand Up Guys podcast. On today's episode, I will be talking about the new Amazon show, Batman Caped Crusader. Specifically, the first two episodes. I thought it would be kind of fun to do a series of videos on this show because if you can't tell by the cadre of Batman posters in my background, I am a huge Batman fan. In fact, he was by far my number one favorite fictional character of all time. And why is that? Well, when I was about 8 years old, Batman, the animated series, came out in the early 90s. And man, I was hooked. I love that show. It's what I watched every day when I got home from school. I was always excited to watch it, loved that show. And then through my teenage years, it wasn't really replayed on television a lot, or at least in my cable market it wasn't. So there was a span of several years there where I didn't watch the show at all. And then when I was in college, before streaming would take off, it came out on DVD, so I bought the box set DVDs of Batman the Animated Series and just revisited the whole series as an adult. And I got to say, man, it holds up. It's definitely one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and it's something that kids and adults alike can appreciate. It's one of those last shows. Well, I mean, I don't know exactly when hand-drawn animation really started to take the backseat to computer animation, but it's definitely one of the best hand-drawn animated shows of all time. You had a full orchestra. Shirley Walker, the conductor of the orchestra, which was fantastic, really adds a lot to that show. And then just the style of that show is amazing. And so, with my love of Batman the Animated Series, I was super excited when I believe it was all the way back in 2021. This Batman Cape Crusader series was announced. Bruce Timm involved again, just like he was in the original Batman the Animated Series. And then at some point, it was also announced that Ed Brubaker would be executive producing. Now, if for those of you that don't read comics, Ed Brubaker, a fantastic comic book writer, actually probably my favorite comic book writer. He does a lot of good crime noir stuff. His series Criminal is probably my favorite independent comic book series of all time. It's fantastic. And basically, any of the stuff he does with Sean Phillips, all their crime comics, fantastic. And Ed, early in his career, in the early 2000s, actually did write Batman comic books. So he knows what he's doing, and so it's very exciting. I was very excited to hear that he was on board. Um, all right, so before this episode, I will delve kind of deeper into episodes 1 and 2. But before that, I just did want to just talk about the series as a whole and kind of my first impressions. So I gotta admit, I'm still kind of processing how I feel about the show. I will say I do like it, uh, uh, and the things I think I won't even say I don't like. There's things about it that I'm still kind of processing that I think, given another season or two, it could very well win me over on. Speaking of which, I wasn't sure if this show would get another season or not, because um, it had a kind of a tumultuous production, because in the middle of being production, it was announced that for whatever reason, Warner Brothers, HBO Max, which it was going to originally be on, because of course it's owned by Warner Brothers, They were no longer going to distribute it. But luckily, Amazon stepped in and to distribute it, and I'm very glad they did. It's by the way, that's crazy to me. Like I just the prospect of them thinking that this show would not be successful. I don't know. I was shocked to hear that they were not going to distribute it. But anyway, luckily in this day and age, it's not always a lost cause. Other people can step in, and Amazon did, which I'm very thankful for. Um, but going back to the season two thing, I just read that longtime comic book writer J.M. DeMatteis announced that he's written an episode for season two, which again, does that guarantee a season two? No, I'm sure things could happen. Like if the show didn't get enough views, they would just call it, you know. But at least it looks like there's, potential for a season two. And also, um, the very ending of these 10 episodes, you know, seeded something for a season two. Um, the Joker, which I'll be honest, the Joker is a great character. By the way, there's going to be spoilers in here, so you probably should watch the show before watching this. But the Joker's obviously a great character. I know you can't have a Batman show without the Joker, but and to be honest, I'm glad they didn't have him, you know, a proper Joker episode in this season that they're holding off. But I almost wish they would hold off longer. I just feel like the Joker is an overused character. Like anytime there's a movie series or whatever, a new series, it's always, oh, we got to have the Joker, get the Joker out. And I'm like, he, Batman's Rogues Gallery is so great. You can skip the Joker here and there. But for the most part, a Joker-free season, which I like. Um, so I'm going to pull up Wikipedia here. I didn't for a lot of shows I've been making my own notes where I'll pause, take notes. But with these, I really just wanted to enjoy them all the way through. So I'm just going to kind of use the Wikipedia recaps. Before I get to the recaps, let me read this because I thought it was interesting. This is Wikipedia's what they call the premise for Batman Cape Crusader. So Batman Cape Crusader reimagines the Batman mythos with a focus on the detective noir aspects of the character. Set in the dark, forbidding Gotham City, inspired by Batman stories from the 1940s and 1960s, the series presents a young Bruce Wayne in the early stages of his crime-fighting career. It explores his struggle against the city's rampant corruption, which I like that they're exploring that, and crime, including a corrupt police force and a city riddled with mob warfare. Speaking of which, I'm really glad they brought back Rupert Thorne as like a big bad. Rupert Thorne, I thought, was used very well in the original Batman the Animated Series, but he's one of those characters who I believe died in the comics like forever ago. And unlike most comic book characters, he still, to my knowledge, has not made a comeback, which is fine. I guess if you're going to permanently kill a a Batman villain, it makes sense for it to be like a mob boss type character because you can always just create another mob boss. But I do like that they're using Rupert Thorne again. It's cool. Um, Unlike previous iterations, Batman Cape Crusader emphasizes a grim, moody tone, with Batman often taking a back seat as other characters, uh, including new interpretations of classic villains like Catwoman, Clayface, and allies like Barbara Gordon, take on more prominent roles. The series is noted for its serialized storytelling, focusing on episodic detective cases that build up to a larger narrative over the season. The show showcases a more grounded and less flamboyant take on its characters while integrating new and diverse spins on classic roles. So I want to hit on something in there. It talked about Batman taking a backseat to other characters, and that's kind of true. It's weird because if anybody's ever read, and I highly encourage people to do so, if you ever read the series Gotham Central, which is actually co-written by Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka, who also wrote one of the episodes we'll be talking about today. Um, it's first of all a fantastic series. It focuses on the GCPD. Renee Montoya is a huge character in that series, as she takes on also a prominent role in this series. And Batman in that series, while he's in it, he's very much in the background. The focus is never on Batman, but he runs kind of through the background of that series, and he does things that the police see the aftermath of and stuff like that. And while this show is not like that, like you do get scenes of Batman in the Batcave talking to Alfred, doing Batman things, just like you would hope to do. But I was surprised how much this show, you spend a lot of time with characters like Barbara Gordon, Renee Montoya, and it really is an ensemble show. It's not just Batman all the time. And I don't know how I feel about that because, to me, Batman still is the most compelling character. So I do like spending time, through Batman's lens. But it is definitely interesting of them taking this approach and giving a large chunk of the spotlight to other characters. Let's talk about some of the characters in the voice cast. I will say most of this voice cast people I'm not familiar with. The lead, Hamish Linklater, I've seen him in a few things. I remember he was in that Legion television show, and I know he's been in a couple other things I've seen. I'm not super familiar with him. He's, of course, Batman Bruce Wayne. I did like him, but I will say I think one of the reasons I liked him is I think he does sound fairly close to Kevin Conroy. Like, I do kind of think when they casted the role, I think they probably were looking for someone somewhat reminiscent of Kevin Conroy, which I think he is. And I like that. It's not exactly the same, but it's definitely in that wheelhouse. You got James Watkins. I'm not familiar with him as Alfred Pennyworth. They did, to make it a difference, they did go with Fat Alfred for this series, which I believe in the comics, like early Batman comics, I think Alfred is kind of a bigger guy, and then eventually somewhere along the way he apparently got on those Ozempics or something, and he became the thinner Alfred that we're used to. You got Eric Morgan Stewart as James Gordon. Again, not familiar with him. Crystal Joy Brown as Barbara Gordon. John DiMaggio, I know he's done a million voices. Of course, voice of Bender. He actually was the voice of Joker in the Batman Red Hood animated movie, which to me, I think is still my favorite of those DC like animated straight to video or streaming type movies. He plays Harvey Bullock. So yeah, let's start talking about some of these characters. First of all, I thought it was very strange that Bruce and Alfred, like, even though they seemingly get along, like, Bruce continuously refers to him as Pennyworth. Like, and then, spoiler alert, last episode, he has a moment where he almost calls him Pennyworth again, and he's like, Alfred, so he has this change of heart. But there's one episode, I forget which one, kind of touches on, Bruce in the aftermath of his parents getting killed, and Alfred trying to cheer him up, but he's just crestfallen. And then eventually one night, as a child, he bursts in on Alfred sleeping, and he says like, "I'm gonna make them all pay, and you're gonna help me." And so I hope in further seasons, I hope they kind of go actually back and kind of explore Bruce's turning into Batman, his training, and his relationship with Alfred during that time. Because I was taken aback a little bit by why he was as contentious with Alfred as he seemingly was. Um, I do like that they made Barbara Gordon a like defense attorney. I think that's a cool thing. It makes me wonder if if they get multiple seasons. Who knows? One of my criticisms of the series is I think some of the storylines were rushed, but at the same time, with these shows, they tend not to like. Generally speaking, they get 3 or 4 seasons max, and so I can see them not wanting to bide their time too much. But I'll go into it in later uh, episodes. But I think both the Harley Quinn storyline and the Two Face storyline, in my opinion, were rushed and would have benefited if they could have got more time as Harleen Quinzel and Harvey Dent before they made the turns that we all knew what they were going to make. Um, I do like, I will say, even though this isn't the Harley Quinn episode, I do like that her origin in this series has nothing to do with the Joker. Um, I think that story's been told. We get it, and so I do like that they're doing a totally different spin. And this is another thing I wanted to get to that I both enjoy, but am apprehensive about, and something they're going to have to win me over with is this very much feels like an alternate universe Batman the Animated Series, where first of all, the things I like, the style of this show. I'm so glad because in many ways it feels like Batman the Animated Series in style. You get like that 1940s style. All the cars look like 1940s cars. Very cool designs. The architecture is really cool. I like they have phones, but there's the like old school rotary phones. Oh, one thing I really liked is so at one point, so it seems like, and this is also interesting, that even though Jim Gordon is in this series, it seems like Barbara Gordon is going to play more of the, Gordon that Batman interacts with. And instead of doing the um, bat signal, um, Batman gives her a telephone number, which I'm like, they should have done this in the comics ages ago. Listen, I like the symbology of the bat signal, but in this day and age, it's silly, especially when it's a sign that the police are openly working with a vigilante, which the public would not go for. Um, so I've always thought for the longest time that in the comics they should do that, where Batman, uses Wayne Tech to make an untraceable phone, gives it to Gordon. That's the new bat signal. It makes sense. But what I really liked is so he gives Barbara the bat number. When she calls it, it goes to Alfred, and then he's got to do the old school phone operator thing where he unplugs it out of like switchboard operator and plugs it into another slot to contact her with Batman. And I love that. Just style wise, it's so cool. I loved it. So yeah, love the style of this show for sure. Now, as far as you know, the different takes on the characters, personally, like I'm open to it because I think some of the best comic books that DC has put out are Elseworld comic books, which basically take the characters and reimagine them in a whole different world. Now, this isn't a totally like that because some of the characters are exactly kind of how you would think they would be. But we got, as we'll talk about in episode 1, instead of Oswald Cobblepot, we got a female version of the Penguin, Oswalda Cobblepot. And while we didn't get enough of her here to really make me conclusively say, like, it's just this, male penguin with a female coat of paint, or is there more to her? I don't think we know that quite yet, but I'm certainly open to it. And then, again, I'll talk about it more in a future episode when I talk more about the Harley Quinn episode. But the take on her is very different as well. But I just think it was rushed. I'm open to it. Bullock in this series, you got Bullock and Flash. Now, Flash was not in Batman the Animated Series, but he was in Batman Year One, which is a seminal Batman comic by Frank Miller that anyone looking to get into Batman comics should read. In fact, if you're looking to get into Batman comics and you never have, I think Batman Year One probably the best jumping on point. It's fantastic. But Flash was a corrupt policeman in that. Also, Batman Begins. If you can see, I got my Batman Begins movie poster in the background. Also, my favorite Batman movie, even a little more so than The Dark Knight. Flash, also a character in that, played Jim Gordon's partner, and also he was, a corrupt cop in that as well. I like Renee Montoya a lot. I'm glad they're using her. Of course, I think her. I'm not sure. I know that Harley Quinn debuted in Batman the Animated Series. Renee might not have debuted in Batman the Animated Series, but definitely that's the first place I met her. And if she debuted in the comics, I don't think it would have been like super before that. But she's a great character. In the comics for a while, she became a version of the Question, and then they never really did much with her as the Question. I always thought they should come back to that a little bit, and I think that would be maybe a cool storyline they could do down the road in this series, which is totally possible because I believe it was Greg Rucka that wrote her as the Question, and I'm sure he would love another chance to do that in animated form. You had Jamie Chung as a voice of Harley Quinn. I've definitely heard her name, and I might have seen her in a few things, but I'm not really familiar with her. Diedrich Bader, who played Batman in Batman the Brave and the Bold. He plays Harvey Dent and Two-Face in this. Let me go to some of the guest stars. Christina Ricci as Selena Kyle. Thought she did okay. McKenna Grace as Natalie Knight, aka Nocturna. That's something I'd like to touch on here, and I'll touch more on it in the future in individual episodes. But there's 2 episodes that feature supernatural antagonists, villains, and I kind of didn't like that. I mean, Batman the Animated Series does have some supernatural villains, but it was also, I think, a show that was how should I say this? I think it was a show designed with both kids and adults in mind, so it kind of worked better. This show, I would be really curious how kids, they're the age now that I was when I discovered Batman the Animated Series, would feel about this series, because I don't because it focuses less on Batman. I'm thinking kids probably wouldn't love this series as much. And so if this is going to cater more to adults, I would almost prefer to much more grounded versions of all the villains and not have supernatural elements. I don't know. I just like this 40s feeling atmosphere. I like the idea of having more tactile. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. More grounded versions of all the villains. I think is really cool. In fact, I remember I read a Elseworld Batman story once where, like, again, it took place in like the 30s or 40s, and like Mr. Freeze was in it, but he was just like this mobster. He didn't actually have an ice gun, and it was kind of cool. Um, no pun intended. Um, let's see what else we got. Just trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to touch on before I get into the individual episodes. I'm sure there's things I'm forgetting, but yeah, just overall love the style of the show. Um, there's a lot of individual moments that I like, but I think they still have to win me over on some of the alternative takes on characters and the whole ensemble feel, rather than just focusing on more on Batman. Um, I will say one thing, and I think that it's probably totally due to them just not wanting to pay royalties to an artist. But one of my favorite things about the original Batman the Animated Series are the title cards. They have these awesome title cards with cool artwork, and this show didn't have those. And I'm thinking it's probably just because they don't want to pay an artist in royalties, on and things like that. But man, it would have been so cool. The opening credits on this show are okay, but they pale in comparison to the Batman the Animated Series opening. But I really think the title cards would have been a really cool throwback to Batman the Animated Series. I would have loved to have seen that. Um, okay, well, with that in mind, let's get into episode 1 and 2 and talk about them. So the premiere episode is called In Treacherous Waters. The story is by Jace Ricci and Bruce Timm. Um, I will say, because when Ed Brubaker was announced, I was like, yay, we're going to get episodes written by Ed Brubaker. And he also mentioned that he got Greg Rucka to write an episode, which I was like, yay. So I was definitely hoping he would wrote more actual comic book people into writing episodes. Um, a lot of these episodes are written by, I'm supposedly talented people, but more people on the TV side than the comic book side. And I don't know, I just, I so often in the movies and stuff, you don't really get the involvement of comic book writers, and so I would like to see it more. But like I said, they did. Apparently, J.M. DeMatteis said he has written an episode for season 2. I imagine Ed will be back for some episodes. I would think good chance Greg Rucka will be back for an episode or two. Also, I gotta say, I know we're not in the days anymore for the most part of 22 to 25 episode seasons. But man, I wish we could get more than 10 episodes for a season of this show. I'm really hoping if season 2 is greenlit that they push for, I don't know, at least 15 or 16. These 10 went by really fast, and I was like, man, we really could have used more. Um, so I'm just going to read the Wikipedia synopsis for this episode. Oswalda Cobblepot, owner and singer of the Iceberg Lounge, has been, I think she's voiced by Minnie Driver, has been making a name for herself in Gotham City's criminal underworld as the Penguin, while trying to eliminate her mob boss rival, Rupert Thorne, by destroying his organization's warehouses. However, Thorne survives with help from a leak in her circle. Believing it to be her youngest son, Aaron, Oswalda kills him. However, her eldest son and the real source, Ronald, seeks out GCPD Commissioner Jim Gordon for protection. With help from Jim's daughter, Barbara Gordon, and a mysterious vigilante called the Batman, Ronald safely reaches the GCPD. But Oswalda launches a missile to destroy the police station. Unbeknownst to her, the station is evacuated before it's destroyed. Batman successfully captures Oswalda, but realizes later that in doing so, he left a power vacuum in Gotham's underworld for Thorne to fill. So yeah, this is one of those things like I kind of mentioned earlier. I'm totally open to a female version of the Penguin, an alternate version. I think that's pretty cool. But in this episode, like I said, I don't think, like, I'm curious of her backstory. Like, I hope in a season 2 we get her backstory, because here, like, if you just gender swap a villain, like, that's not interesting on its own. So I hope we get more from her character eventually to kind of sell me that, oh, like, there is a good reason for exploring this version, rather than the Oswald version. I will say here, I thought it was like, she's so callous that she's just like willing to like totally murk her sons. Um, and I'm like, I don't know if that detracts from the depth of her character or makes her more intriguing. That's another thing maybe we need a backstory on, is like, does she have a million other kids somewhere and she's just like, she's like, I'm wondering if it's almost like a Ma Beagle situation from DuckTales, where she's just got a million kids and it's like, she can afford to lose a couple. But I don't know. It just didn't seem like she had, a strong connection to her sons, and I'm kind of curious if there's a backstory to that. Also, the Batmobile in this show, not nearly as cool as the Batmobile from Batman the Animated Series. It's okay, but definitely not as cool. So yeah, we get. I do like the dynamic. Barbara Gordon, defense attorney, Jim Gordon, police commissioner. Those positions cause them to butt heads later on in an episode. And I do wonder, future spoilers, by the end of this series, Harvey Dent is no longer the district attorney. And so I'm wondering if they're setting it up for Barbara to be DA in future, season 2, if they get it. I could totally see that development happening, and it kind of makes sense. Also, that's also intriguing, just the idea of a DA secretly working with Batman is cool. I like that. I don't know how much I have to say about this episode. It was a kind of an intriguing, setup to the world. We get a little taste of Batman, a little taste of Barbara Gordon. I believe, if it wasn't, I think it was this episode, we also, get an early taste of Harvey Dent. And he's kind of very abrasive and douchey, kind of, which is, I thought was kind of intriguing, because traditionally with Harvey Dent, it's been like his outwardly uh, very nice and courageous, all these good things, and then when he becomes Two Face, kind of the darkness that he's hiding within comes out. I'll talk about more when we get to the Harvey Dent episodes, but they kind of flip that a little bit in this series, which I think is intriguing. But yeah, I have no idea. Like, I haven't thought about these enough to really rate the episodes score wise. I think if I was just gonna give my impressions of this first season out of 10, I would probably go 7 out of 10. A lot of stuff I liked, uh, but a few things I'm just kind of in the middle on, and I think another. It's going to take at least another season to kind of get me to make my mind up about those things I'm unsure on. So let's go over this episode 2. Um, this one is called dot 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 and be a villain. This is the episode written by Greg Rucka. So the summary is thus: GCPD Detective Renee Montoya is assigned to locate missing actress Yvonne Francis. Following a failed interrogation of Bruce Wayne, she investigates the film studio where she learns Francis' fellow actor Basil Carlo may have been lying about his alibi. However, he is seemingly murdered before she can confirm. Upon further investigation, she learns Carlo was ashamed of his face, which led him to being typecasted and Francis rejecting his advances. Ultimately, he used an experimental serum to make his body more malleable, allowing him to alter his face as he pleases. Montoya and Batman eventually stumble across Carlo, who faked his death and kidnapped Francis out of a desire to play a villain for real. Montoya and Batman defeat Carlo and rescue Francis, though Batman disappears before Montoya can apprehend him. Um, so I like that this episode gives Renee Montoya uh, time to shine, which is unsurprising because anyone who's read, Gotham Central or a lot of the DC stuff Greg Rucka has written, he definitely loves this character. Um, and so it's no surprise that she gets a lot of this spotlight here. I did like this version of Clayface. Of course, in Batman the Animated Series, it was the Matt Hagen version of Clayface. Although I believe in that series, they kind of took um, the Basil Carlo origin and kind of applied it to Matt Hagen. Um, I mean, if you go back, like the in the animated Batman animated series, there's a Clayface episode where Clayface is in this TV studio and he's looking at all these monitors of different people, and he eventually like freaks out and he starts transforming into all these things. It's regarded as one of the best pieces of animation in the whole animated series um, of Batman animated series. It's fantastic. Uh, there's nothing as cool as that here, but his power seems to work um, somewhat differently. But my thing is, again, if this was like presented as like the more grounded universe, and this guy was just like a master of like makeup effects of like changing his face, a part of me would have thought that was cooler rather than having kind of the sci-fi nature of, oh, he's got the serum injected in his face, so his face is kind of falling apart, but he can temporarily change it into other people. But I still like this episode. But it makes me wonder, like, if they do future season, like, do you ever think they'll have like Basil Carlo as like a reoccurring villain, or would he just be a one and done? It's kind of interesting. Also, like I kind of wonder, you know, again, who knows if they'll get future seasons, but if they do, like just how different some of the other takes on classic villains could be. I'm very interested. Oh, one other thing I wanted to um, go back on just because. So there's an episode, and again, I'm not going to go into details about that episode yet, but there's an episode that has Dick Grayson, um, has Jason Todd, Stephanie Brown, and Carrie Kelly all in one episode as like little kids that are orphans. And it's interesting, but very perplexing because, like, let's say this show's a hit and it gets several more seasons. Like, do you think they'd eventually do like a Batman takes one or more of these kids on as wards, or do you think they'd almost set it up as like, oh, he's only going to pick one of these kids to be his Robin, but like, will they go the traditional route of Dick Grayson, or will it end up, being like, you know, Steph or Carrie? I don't know what they're setting up to, or if they'll ever go that route, or if it's just like, we like these characters, we want to get them in, and we can do anything we want because this is an alternate universe type thing. I was really kind of surprised by that episode that they did that, but it does. Listen, it's got me thinking, like, where they could go with that. Of these two episodes, I think I probably like the Clayface one a little bit more. But they set up, they gave us a taste. Episode 1 of Barbara Gordon, episode 2, Renee Montoya. The thing that's weird watching these is, like, I feel like the way the Batman the animated episodes were organized, like, in my mind I could keep straight like what scenes happen in each episode because they're more on task. Whereas since these are like I said, more of an ensemble thing that bounce around a lot more from character to character. Like there's scenes that I remember, but I'm like, what episode was that in? It's like hard to remember. Like I was saying earlier, like the episode that flashed back to his childhood for a little bit. Like I don't really remember what episode that was crammed into. It's because they have scenes like that. It makes it harder to remember exactly what happened in each episode. So in that way, I don't know if I really like that. And I was also thinking, like, there's so many Batman the animated series episodes that I've watched multiple times. I think they're very, very rewatchable. And while I'm sure at one point I will want to rewatch these episodes, I don't think since they're not as self-contained and they got storylines that carry through from one to the other in subtle ways. Like, I don't know if I'll, even if I did want to rewatch these, I'd probably almost want to like be like, well, I I don't want to feel like I'm missing like something. So I'd be more apt to like watch them, I guess, all the way through in order rather than just being like, oh, I want to go back. I feel like watching a Clayface episode. I'll go back to the Clayface episode because I feel like, well, just that they're not as self-contained as the episodes of Batman the animated series. So I guess I just gotta kind of accept that. In the premise thing, it mentioned how like there's going to be a series of episodes that tell their own story, but then they're seeding kind of an overall story as well. They do that, but I think the Two-Face episode or the Two-Face character is probably the biggest overall story they're trying to develop. I guess as well as Rupert Thorne kind of being a big bad type character. Um, but yeah, I'm curious what you guys think of this, especially people like me who are familiar with Batman the Animated Series. Um, so far, I don't. Well, that's not fair. I don't know if anything could ever come along and top Batman the Animated Series, because you're never going to get, you know, something, a hand drawn full orchestra. There's just not enough budget these days to do something like that again. So in that way, Batman the Animated Series will always be unique. But you know, I am overall very pleased with this show. Um, Again, I think I'm going to give this season a 7 out of 10. Love the style of it. But I'm still kind of need to be sold on the ensemble nature and, uh, you know, the alternative um, kind of universe version of some of these characters. Um, but yeah, I'm excited. Season 2, hopefully, fingers crossed. Would love to see more comic book writers in the mix. A higher episode count. Again, 10 was just too little for me. I think they need to expand that. I mean, honestly, I would love an old school like 22 episode order, but I'm pretty sure that's probably out of the the realm of possibility for a show like these days. But yeah, I think I'm going to cut it off there. So, guys, tell me, please, what did you think of Batman Cape Crusader? I always want to say Batman the Cape Crusader, but it's just Batman Cape Crusader, which I don't know. Um, uh, uh, it just seems a little bit odd without having the article in it. But Batman Cape Crusader, season 1. Guys, tell me what you thought. I will be doing more episodes that cover the other episodes. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this Batman talk. But I think that'll do it to kick off this series of episodes. If you will, please follow on the YouTube channel, subscribe. You can also listen in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice. Leave thumbs up, comments, positive reviews, all that good stuff. If you like, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. But that'll do it for all of my shenanigans and poppycock this week. Please, please, please tune in again next week. Bye, guys.